Thank you all. This is Chetna from NASPA for joining today for the tech series. All the attendees are on listen only mode. There is a question panel below. If you have any questions, please post questions in the question panel below post the entire presentation is completed. Today we have Nitin Mishra, who is Chief Product Officer at NetMagic, entity NetMagic. He has over 20 years of IT service industry experience and is a part of core management team since it was a 5-member startup. Currently, he is a board member to NetMagic Solutions Limited and NTT Communication Network. He is responsible for driving various and profitability across existing product lines. I'll request Nitin to take over and start the presentation.
Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to this webinar on building always available, resilient, secure IT infrastructure. I'm also joined with me by two colleagues, Ashwin Batra and Rishikesh Kamath. So Ashwin specializes in data protection and DR services, and Rishi is specializing on security. So they will also put their views and add to this whole webinar today. So what we have seen, so what we have seen is most of the organizations over last 1 or 2 years have undertaken digital transformation. So the good part has been that everything has been, depending on industry to industry, a lot of applications which are customer facing, internal facing, have been automated. And but what also this means is that the dependency on IT has gone manifold for a business in all the aspects, whether it is dealing with customers or vendors or internal employees or partners. So everything depends a lot on the IT. So when any challenges are faced with respect to availability of IT infrastructure, it has a major impact on the business itself. While we are in the middle of the whole COVID pandemic, and I will just share some of the instances on how it impacted companies. So it was clearly visible that the organizations which were well prepared, which had resilient infrastructure, they could very quickly reconfigure and could continue to a large extent to service their customers through their digital channels. But some customers who hadn't yet were fully ready from the resiliency perspective, they faced challenges. To give an example, I think we have a customer who had some part of his infrastructure on premise, and while and one of those servers went down, and during the lockdown, obviously his people cannot commute, so he had to request us to bring the data up from a backup, and only after that they could really be again functional. So things like that, and there are things like people are not ready for work from home. Some customers didn't have enough VPN licenses. Some people didn't have laptops for their employees to really log in and start working from home. So a lot of such challenges which we saw customers facing. One of the other challenges was the bandwidth. Everything was planned to be working from office. So when the traffic started coming to the applications from internet, obviously there was a sudden spike in requirement of bandwidth. So all of this clearly indicates that one needs to be really prepared to continue business as much as business as usual kind of a scenario. And that is where today we are going to share some of the good practices and what really one needs to look at. So while I was talking more of COVID, but there are many other things which can happen and which can go wrong. Power failures, hardware failures, network outages. There can be software failures, where some specific issue with application, so we need to have another DR to be ready for that. There will be human errors, and all of this when one builds the whole configures the IT, one needs to factor that any of these things going wrong, even then the whole setup needs to be up and running. So when we look at how do we what are the key things one needs to plan for, right, when to really address and to really build a infrastructure like this. So one first important point I would like to highlight is that one can, and the legacy applications can be a big hindrance because not necessarily all the new age cloud platforms will support legacy applications. Some of them have very unique databases or need some particular kind of risk machines, etc. So those may not be easily portable. So it's very important that one needs to start on a journey that if there is any legacy application, one needs to modernize so that it becomes easily portable onto various infrastructure options which are available. Second is on every aspect of the IT needs to be considered from a resiliency perspective. At the database level, at the network level, and each of the components of that. I will, in the next slide, I will cover in more detail on what are the key components one needs to look at. Thirdly, I think multi-cloud, hybrid cloud strategy is very, very important because this is really what gives you flexibility to have IT infrastructure, underlying layers on demand, and it offers scalability because in pandemic or disaster kind of scenarios, you really need some of the things are unpredictable, so it's very important to have the right amount of scalability and performance which is available. So unless you are you have cloud as part of your strategy, it may difficult, it may pose some issues to scale up when required. But the moment you talk about using multiple infrastructures, security becomes big concern. And so while doing some of these steps, one really needs to pay a lot of attention to how does one secure these assets. And clearly the traditional way of just having firewalls, IDS, IPS and protecting your data center are not good enough in a multi-cloud environment, and also not good enough when it's a work from home or where secure access is required for even your internal resources. So one really needs to go in deeper on how do you architect your security in this kind of scenario. And finally, the managed services piece is very important because when you're working in a multi-cloud environment and new kind of things, skills becomes critical. So one needs to have a way where the support is readily available. So these are some of the key aspects one needs to look at. I would rather say some of the prerequisites to when one is creating available, resilient, secure infrastructure. So various components, typically we have seen some of the customers faced challenges because your infrastructure is as good as the weakest link, right? So you have considered resiliency in 5 aspects, but left out one that still may cause problems. So one needs to really look at all the aspects of IT, which obviously from your end user perspective, their connections, VPN access for them, or could be a zero trust kind of secure mechanism for them to access applications. You need to look at your data center where your applications are hosted. You need to look at both private and public network. You may have your MPLS, so the redundancy in your network part of it, providing secure access, because we clearly saw increased security attacks once people started to do work from home. So you cannot open up things because suddenly people your people who are behind firewall or within your office have moved out. You cannot open up things which will expose you to hackers. So secure access becomes very important aspect to consider. and obviously your applications and database, also should look at. So it is a complete 360 view. That is what one needs to take while planning, your ability to be resilient in disaster scenarios. So if you really look at, if you go to the next level in terms of how do we really go and what are, how, if you want to really look at the key pillars, which we need to go in more depth, these are the 4 key pillars of your IT infrastructure. So hybrid cloud, which will encompass primarily your data center part of it, your application database will all be part of this. Then second key pillar would be to look at networks. Third, data continuity, and fourth is security. So I will speak about both hybrid cloud and network and what one needs to look at from the IT infrastructure perspective, and then I will invite Ashwin, who is on data continuity, and then Rishikesh on security aspects. So this is really what we look at, ideal scenario, which really gives you full flexibility in building resiliency. So if you look at it, at the center is the cloud management platform. So this primarily is your, I would say, a control of your entire infrastructure. So from here you can orchestrate your all your workloads, which could be on bare metal, maybe for XYZ reason. It could be licensing, it could be an Oracle license, or there could be any constraint on particular performance because of which some applications on bare metal. So through this common management platform, you should be able to look at monitoring your workloads on bare metal, your workloads which are virtualized but in a dedicated private cloud kind of environment. Then your workloads which might be on any of the public clouds, which could be the entity Simply Cloud or AWS, Azure, or Google. And now the organizations which have moved even further and started to and evolved their applications into the containerization, those will also have their workloads running on containers. So effectively, depending on workloads, you should be able to choose the kind of cloud or bare metal you want to run it on. But your central management platform needs to support monitoring and management, across all these platforms. Then next layer is that even if your workloads are spread across multiple IT infrastructure, you still need the common set of services. If you're HANA, then you need to have SAP HANA and apps requirements could be there. There could be data analytics, which can still be a requirement across multiple platforms. So you will need migration services, to migrate from on-premise to cloud, which should be one needs to look at how much time it takes, how easy it is to migrate from one platform to another. Managed services where skills are available for you to manage this multiple platforms on your own or through outsourced partner. Security, from the overall perspective, I think one cannot look at I would say particular premise or localized security, but you should be able to apply your security policies as per your compliance requirements across the workloads, on all this multiple cloud or hybrid cloud kind of environments. In networks, your network should be flexible. It should be not only connecting to your data center itself, but your employees should be able to connect to your workloads on a private network, even if they are on Google, Simply Cloud, or Azure. So that is where software-defined WAN really comes into the play, which is much more flexible as compared to the traditional MPLS. And lastly, data protection is again a requirement, which cuts across, right? Whether data is on any of those clouds, you still need to have backups. You still need to, if you're a financial organization, you may have your own archival policies in terms of how long you need to keep it. So those policies still need to be implemented, across all the applications and databases, right? So, so really, this is how, but one can really decide based on each of the workload where to put it. But as far as one can integrate it through a common management platform and have can deploy the policies uniformly across, I think then it's ideal, architecture where then you get a lot of flexibility, and you can make sure that services don't get impacted even if some particular component has to fail. So as the second part where I spoke, the network is critical. So this is what we look at when we talk about, a resilient network, where you may have your MPLS network. You'll obviously have internet in most of the networks. You'll have employees at multiple places, at customer side, at your headquarters, and you may even have your dealers and partners who are connecting to you, right? So effectively, you can have a mix. MPLS allows you some flexibility, but with SD-WAN, it becomes totally flexible. Whether it's your dealer network or even your own offices, SD-WAN, is really centrally configurable, and there is no dependency on the last mile feasibility. Because whenever you go for a lease line kind of a setup or MPLS, there is a challenge of last mile flexibility, and some areas it may not be reliable and things like that. With SD-WAN, you basically, as far as you have a good internet pipe, you have a secured connection, and the real difference between VPN and really to the next level SD-WAN is that you pretty much get a guaranteed quality of service. So that is really so while it's running on a public network, you still have the technology ensures the quality of service for your users, and at the back you can extend the with SD-WAN gateway. There could the private connect, the traffic which is coming through the MPLS can be extended to any of your workloads, which could be again on any of the public clouds, Amazon, Microsoft, Azure, and others, right? So effectively, I think a good combination of VPN, SD-WAN, your private network can really help you, really be very flexible and resilient, in disaster kind of scenarios. So that was, I think, with that now I will invite Ashwin to dwell a little deeper on the data continuity aspects of the resiliency. Ashwin, over to you.
Thank you, Nitin sir. So as we see, Nitin sir covered the two important pillars of building IT resiliency. I will quickly cover up the data continuity pillar, and for that, let me just have the next slide, which talks about what are the key pillars for building a data continuity. So at the bottom, we have the infrastructure layer, which typically talks about your data center, the servers, the compute, storage, network layer. Then on top of it comes the data protection, right? When we talk about essential backups, having tape backups, having multiple disk copies, backup to cloud, then essentially the DR site. And on top of it, the important aspect to it is the recovery processes, because the data gets replicated, but the processes around it. The data is getting replicated, ensuring, and the validation of that data. And on top of it comes the important part is how does one ensure that, the risk is being covered off. And all this comes from the policies. So broadly, if I have to segregate these pointers, this fall under the people and processes. And the other pillar falls under disaster recovery. So if you combine all these 7 pointers together, they actually form the data continuity pillars. So what happens here is, each of these aspects are, the building blocks for having a resilient, always available IT infrastructure, right? So let us, go ahead, and I'll just cover up the next slide. Yeah. So this is the DC tier, and if I have to, map this with the 7 pointers or the pyramid that we saw earlier. So the first was on, the people and the policies, right? So here, as part of the DR plan development and implementation, what we actually do is we get into a consultancy mode, and understand the infrastructure, understand the risk, and define a complete TR plan. We understand infrastructure, what are the priorities, which are the critical applications, we jot them out and create a complete plan. Then the second step comes where we talk about DR management and drills. Here we sort of cover the aspect of risk management, right? Because here what we offer is periodic drills. So this helps, the organization ensure about how much, the RPOs and RTOs look like today, and what is the amount of business loss that a company offers. And most importantly, it also gives you a sort of a readiness details, in case of a disaster, how ready are we. So all those risks are typically, catered on the second part, which is the DR management and drills. And now when we talk about the last four layer, so on the top two we covered the people and policies. The other two layers are the disaster recovery side. So here we talk about the first part was on identifying the infrastructure, the critical components, and now we decide on what would be the workflows, how the data would get replicated. So this is how, the entire process gets defined. And if you look at the bottom part, which is the disaster recovery side, depending on your infrastructure, we can design and consult on the DR site infrastructure. So traditionally, if we many customers today have these legacy applications, right, which are running on the RISC platform. So for those sort of infrastructure, definitely a hot site comes into picture, where the infrastructure is like similar to what looks like at DC. And there are many options to it, right? We can have a completely hosted infrastructure, we can have create a private cloud. And for all the virtualized environment, with the newer tools available, we have the option of DR on cloud, which actually is a cold site, which means only all the data gets replicated at the DR site, and it doesn't consume any resources, compute resources or memory resources. That means it helps lower down the overall TCO. And if you look at the complete service, this is offered as a complete managed services. So here, from a services standpoint, there are experienced DR managers who actually get involved right from the DR planning management phase till the drills, till the reports. So these are, the five the four stacks that help us cater to the data continuity pyramid out there. And from a BCP or a business continuity perspective, being into the data center industry, we also have definitely the hosting services, the cloud services, but we also offer the work area recovery area. So basically here, the customer can have the seating space, and they can connect and stay close to the infra. So overall, the DR services caters to the pyramid here. And so there are ways to do and have this process defined. So on the next slide, I would like to cover up traditionally customers definitely had these DR sites, and there was always a manual process which was followed. But with automation coming into picture, I would like to talk about what benefits one can reap from automation. So traditionally, definitely, there was a very minimal RTO and RPO visibility, which means customer could not do periodic drills, and neither he was aware of what is the risk that it carries. But with the help of automation tools today, you get a visibility into your applications. So you get a dashboard which actually shows what your RPO looks like and what would be the RTO would be. And definitely this helps to reduce the risk and increases the visibility of the business loss that the customer can sustain. The processes, from a processes perspective, all the processes were manual, right? And with the change in technology, and the attrition rate, people come and go. So the process is defined by an X resource, how well he understands it, and high chances, it could be error prone. The updation of the processes are all manual stuff, which eventually at times, can hamper the overall DR drills. With automation coming into picture, we have these automated runbooks and processes, which periodically gets updated. And once configured, it's just on the click of button. The It's available for the resources to view into it, and it in turn helps bring simplicity and accelerate the overall DR processes. Definitely, with automation, as you all know, the complexity of executing these steps get reduced. So there are workflows, and if you look at the library, so across, I guess it's supposed like more than 450 plus libraries. When I talk about these libraries, these are specific to sort of applications, the workflows that pertaining to databases, to network, to DNS changes. So all of these, like a template where you just fill in the details, and it just does the rest for you. So it helps reduce the overall deployment time. So you can quickly get your DR settings done, and ensure a proper DR in place. And definitely, with all this brings, there's no need for do a manual DR drills. So it completely automates, and that also ensures you can have multiple DR drills instead of a limited drill, considering the time that it takes for doing a manual drill. And definitely, with automation coming in picture, it gives you increased availability of business applications. So overall, in the current scenario of COVID that we are into, we are still talking to many customers and educating them on how can one build a resilient IT, and what are the features DR automation can bring onto the table. So these were, a glimpse of the DR automation piece, and how one can look into a data continuity pillar, and design the right infrastructure. With that, I would
Yeah, thanks,
thank Nitin sir.
Ashwin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwin, to cover that. I think data protection, becomes very key. One is both, while we focus more on disaster recovery part, because if something goes wrong at primary, then one should be able to fail over quickly for from resiliency perspective. But obviously there are, data protection also has other aspects which which pretty much most of you are familiar with. So now with that, I think we'll move to the fourth core pillar that one really needs to consider, which is security. And Rishi, why don't you take us through the security aspects of it? Rishikesh, yeah. Rishikesh, can you hear me? So I can't see Rishi. So what I will do is let me quickly take a minute, or I will present the security slides as well. Ashwin, you are able to hear me, right?
You are audible, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, so that means
Yes, you're audible.
that means some issue at Rishi's. Yeah, so I think Rishi is not able to hear. So anyway, I will continue with on the security slides, and we can take over once he joins in. So clearly, I think we have seen that work from home might be a even rather than one-off thing, it might be a regular practice. I think we read about TCS recently, wherein TCS is planning 75% of their employees will continue to work from home even after the pandemic is over. But in this kind of scenario, there are clearly some of the risks which comes in. So first is obviously the more laptops for personal use. So so there is possibility of employees going to unsafe sites, and even through that, even compromising the organization's networks. Even VPN connections can be from untrusted assets can lead to problems. At times, there may be some relaxing of fire rules that can pose a risk. And with shadow IT being there, at times it can become difficult to get access to all the corporate resources which are there. So primarily, we are basically, when it's work from home, which means we are giving a lot of liberty to, and there's little. So one needs to really ensure that the specific areas of security for work from home are taken care of, or it can really expose all this risk even for the organization's network and applications and database. So primarily a new approach is required to really address all the security concerns in this new scenario. So one needs to really make sure that one of the key aspects is when we are giving when you're on an MPLS or a VPN, it still requires specific investments and incremental time and effort to do that. But there are new ways to do it in way of zero trust, where even without having a VPN, we can give access to employees. So that is one of the ways to look at one of the ways to really one is to look at from the security aspect. You need to enable security for cloud workloads. So as I mentioned in my earlier slides, the security becomes one has to have common policies across workloads, which could be on which could be on multiple clouds. So one really needs to have a cloud-based security. I mean, for example, we work with Akamai, which provides not a point security, but through the so all the traffic will go through and checked whether, irrespective of whether it's for on-premise applications or for cloud, it goes through a security check, and then one can really look at protection from DDoS and other kind of attacks as a centralized policy across workloads. So so these are some of the aspects one needs to look at when we move to the work from home scenario. So going more specific onto the use cases and the solutions which are available. So for availability and security of customer applications, the cloud hosting and native security can be really used. So you have on each of the platforms, there are native security options available. Even from security OEMs have the virtualized instances which can run on multiple cloud platforms, so that those can be leveraged. That becomes clearly a solution for that aspect. Corporate applications, as I was saying, zero trust really is a very a key aspect, because it really makes, in fact, at NetMagic, we have enabled our applications on Zero Trust, and employees are able to use them even if the VPN is not working, but it's as secure as they would otherwise be accessing through a private network. For corporate endpoint protection, one needs to look at solutions from advanced endpoint detection and response, the EPDR solution. For external threat monitoring, there are darknet and deep web shadow IT monitoring solutions which are available. Some of this we'll cover in next slide in slightly more detail. But I think this slide quickly give you the key aspects and the solutions which are available currently. So when we talk about the native solutions, right? So this table in a way gives you a quick snapshot on what is available when you are talking about security in the cloud, security from the cloud, and security on the cloud itself. Right? So for security log management solutions, you have managed service provider options available for security in cloud and security from the cloud. While you can use native, for security of the cloud requirements. So similarly, I think if you go through, one can look at for each of web application firewalls, what kind of options one can look at in each of these scenarios. From this different kind of providers, right? The native solution provider or a managed security service provider. So some of where it's a cross, which clearly shows that those are not available. For example, application penetration testing, can be done by MSSP, but it's not there as security in the cloud. But it's actually testing which is delivered by the expert with the tools, and not really automated options is available there. So this dwelling a little more, as I said, Zero Trust is really a way, which a good approach when you want to do a secured but a hassle-free access to applications. So the EA client, is on the desktop. There is a whole edge network. So what Zero Trust means you don't, you have to have the right, only the authenticated and only the users which are known and confirmed from various aspects are allowed to go inside, right? So anybody, so you don't trust anything unless it is already been known, right? So it will allow only the known users. Everything else is, things are blocked for anybody from outside. So in a way, then you don't need to have on network side, one doesn't need to have the security and encryption, etc., because we know that only the people who are supposed to go in will only go and go inside, right? So that is, the Zero Trust solution. I think there are providers like Akamai and others who really offer this in partnership. Then endpoint detection and response. So basically,
Hello?
when yeah.
Yeah,
Rishi,
Nitin. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I am so sorry. I was throughout there. I am able to hear everything, but now what I did was I just switched off the computer audio and switched it on again in the settings, and I think that solved the problem.
Okay.
So I can take it from here. I'm really sorry for this inconvenience
Sure.
caused to everybody.
Yeah. So okay. So you want to maybe just quickly start from here. So
Yeah.
each of the solutions. Yeah.
Well, yeah, from the Zero Trust. Yeah, I can do it from the Zero Trust, right? So specific to corporate application access, implementing a Zero Trust approach. So as you can see from this high level architecture, first and foremost, this does away with a single point of failure VPN based approach and moves the access to the cloud, which is closer to the users. So that improves the response as well as the end user experience. Now the internal applications are exposed through an enterprise connector, as you can see on the slide. and that is responsible to communicate with the outside world. Effectively, what this means is one needs to open outbound ports in the firewalls rather than the inbound ports, which are inherently risky. The zero trust solution provides adaptive access controls, that is role, group, time, and location-based application access control. It also provides a clientless device posture check and access control based on device posture policies. So this ensures that weak and vulnerable machines do not get access to the application within the network. Zero Trust framework thus implemented provides authenticated users access only to those corporate applications to which they are authorized to access, while also checking for security at the device level. So this replaces network level access with case by case custom application level access. These applications being protected need not be restricted to on-premise deployments, by the way. Even cloud-based applications can be protected in a similar manner with an EAA connector being placed in the cloud setup. And for customers with a multi-cloud environment, this is a big advantage without having to set up a mesh of VPN connections and managing all of that mesh across the different cloud environments. So in the next slide, we will talk about going to the end user itself. So in the previous slide, we talked about protecting the access to corporate applications through zero trust, but we also need to protect the asset from where the access is taking place. That is the endpoint itself. Now, in a strict sense, this can be either the IT endpoint, such as desktop or laptop, or a server endpoint, just as, for example, a physical server or a virtual machine. And EDR solution is more relevant for an endpoint, IT endpoint, where the environment is dynamic and subject to more attacks, either due to direct exposure of the endpoint to the internet or due to unsafe behavior by the user of the asset. That is somebody clicking on a phishing link or somebody opening a document or an attachment without proper training. So when we talk about EDR solutions, we need to ensure a few things. The agent should be lightweight in nature and not affect the performance of the endpoint. The solution should leverage cloud-based analytics given the nature of complexity of the attacks. It should have machine learning and artificial intelligence-based modules to detect the known unknowns and unknown unknowns. Should be able to act in real time to take the protection measures, and hence the R in the EDR, the detection and response. And it should also have deep visibility into the OS environment to identify attacks that leverage otherwise safe tools in a malicious manner. So also known as attackers using living off the land techniques. So use of tools such as PowerShell for this. The EDR solution should also be able to detect threats based on previous behavior-based analysis, should be able to provide vulnerability discovery and also virtual patching. So EDR allows for identification of a potential threat that could be lying low in the network while spreading laterally. It allows for advanced threat hunting, which can detect the spread of the lateral spread of the threat within the network. A few things to note about the EDR solution. One should evaluate how does the solution check for pre-infection areas. Does it use a scoring-based model? Does it have an application communication and control mechanism to prevent the breach before a full-blown malware infection takes place? What about post-infection protection? It eliminates costly dwell times. That is the time from the machine was first infected to the time when the infection was detected and responded to. So these are the areas that one needs to consider while evaluating an EDR solution. And finally, needless to say, an EDR solution should be capable of supporting the maximum types of operating systems so as to ensure that there are no holes left in the protection, right? Now, in the previous two slides, we talked about everything internal to the organization and how we do the monitoring of it internally. Now let's move to the external world in the next two slides. So this slide, which is there in terms of the external threat monitoring, this is required to ensure that your assets or your data or your brand are not being targeted or used in the public domain. This can take multiple forms and generally falls into three categories. The deep, dark surface web monitoring is first category, brand monitoring is second category, and infrastructure monitoring is third category. These reveal multiple issues such as source code leaks or server credential leaks or CXO credential leaks, third-party data leaks, and the likes of that. Monitoring the deep and dark web provides information about threat actors who are actively discussing about a particular organization or trading data related to an organization. So tracking social media platforms like, for example, YouTube for hacking tutorials or Telegram conversations, right? Such stuff can provide an early warning indicator of potential threats to the organization. On the brand side, organizations should be tracking fake customer service numbers, social media profiles, fake mobile applications, phishing campaigns, and fake domains and web pages. On the infrastructure monitoring, which is the third category in this, organizations need to monitor the sprawl of shadow IT across IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS-based services. Identify misconfigured web applications, at-risk SSL certificates, monitor the brand for defacement and for malware intrusions. So all of the above should be fed into the organization's existing security monitoring solutions to provide better context and rich correlation to other activities seen within the organization perimeter. So in the next slide, we will see how we can get even richer context. So this is the final tool in our war chest in terms of the cybersecurity, at least for the current discussion. It is one of that of private threat intelligence. So this can be deployed through application, data, network, and user level decoys. Shown here is a fairly straightforward application level decoy solution. And application decoy mimics your crown jewel applications and corporate applications to identify activity which is otherwise not expected, because these decoys are because these are decoy applications. Threat actors who interact with these applications also leave behind a rich trail of information, such as any usernames they used, the locations they came in from, their form of attacks, etc. So one example shown here is spinning up of a fake SSL VPN portal or a SaaS application to detect and monitor the use of stolen or expired credentials. Of course, integrations, just like we saw in the previous slide, can ensure that the attackers are immediately cut off from the rest of the network. So such application level decoys require nothing to download and install and can go live in under 60 minutes. These are decoys which are enabled in the cloud, which mean that you get context-rich information without the threat actor ever touching or coming near to your environment. And application decoys is only one part of the story. There can be a much deeper level of decoy arrangements in terms of data decoys or network decoys, file-based decoys, which can even enhance further the entire monitoring aspects. So with that, I would like to hand over the control back to Nitin for a quick summary and conclusion before we move on to the Q&A sections. And again, my apologies, something seemed to conk off on the application, because of which we had that glitch. Yeah, Nitin, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rishi. As we went through all the four key pillars of the data to build the IT resiliency, which is hybrid cloud, network, data, and finally security. So in a nutshell, I think it's important to have applications which can be available and can be freely moved from one infrastructure to other. There should not be any proprietary or applications which can hold you or to particular infrastructure, because that in a way hinders the ability to create resiliency. One needs to look at security end to end. As we shown, there are multiple solutions for all the aspects of security. Thirdly, network and secure access are key, and one needs to look at how one can extend the private network to cloud, because applications on cloud is going to be there. And finally, be prepared for the worst. So you need to have data protection, disaster recovery. So even if some of your aspects go to fail, if you have the disaster recovery, it will take care of even in that kind of unforeseen worst kind of scenario. So that's in a summary. Now I think we will answer questions. I can see some questions which are there, so I will read them out. Chetna, it's showing as a very small link there. I'm not able to read. Is it possible for you to read it?
The question
Chetna?
panel, Nitin. Are you saying question panel?
Yeah, on the question panel, I think it's coming as a very thin line where.
Okay, so the question that has been posted is work from home. Could you elaborate on the shadow IT monitoring?
Yeah, okay, I will take that. I'm audible, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, okay. So, see, what has happened is, because people are now working from home, a lot of access to corporate applications has become restricted. or not as seamless as they would want it to be, right? And of course, this is not a new thing, but this sprawl of shadow IT has been there for a long time. Everybody who does not get anything from their IT department would typically just go to a cloud service provider, whether it is from an IaaS perspective or a SaaS perspective, and simply start their business service basis that. So the CIO or the CISO or the CDO, all of these guys are completely into the blind, right? The work from home thing has simply made it more difficult, that because of the relaxation of restrictions, there is a tendency of people to leverage all of this shadow IT more, much more, and more so because the controls are relaxed. I mean, there is, for example, if I am within a corporate network, I would typically be going through a web gateway and my activity might be tracked. But outside the corporate network, I may not be going through the web gateway, and even if I use a shadow IT environment, I may not end up getting noticed, right? So when that happens, the shadow IT sprawl just increases. And shadow IT monitoring, what it does is it identifies from the outside to the inside all such areas of assets, of brands, or everything related to the infrastructure that has come up, which the CXOs are unaware of. Why is it important? Because unless the CXOs know what is there, they will not be able to protect it, right? And if they don't protect it, it could end up having an impact on your brand, or any other thing like a data leak, and you may not even know what has hit you. Yeah, I hope that was able to I was able to answer that.
So there is one more question. Now I can see, I could open the panel. I will just read out. It is for a startup which is creating a web app and corresponding mobile app for banking clients, where security stringent, requirements are very stringent. What are a couple of pointers to implement security features in most cost-effective way, and what are the top 2 or 3 things related to security which many new players forget to do? So basically, it is for a startup who are mobile and web apps. So for them, what are the key, cost-effective ways of security?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So let me take a step back and put myself in the shoes of a startup. If I'm a startup, my first and foremost priority is to roll my product out to the market as soon as possible. And when that happens, security takes a backseat. So we end up either using third-party repositories which are insecure, or we end up doing coding practices which may not be reviewed from a security perspective, right? So it's fine. I mean, that's a business decision. And while that's not necessarily the best approach, but for a startup, that is the case, right? So if you are taking that risk, you need to take some mitigation against that risk. So specific to mobile app and web application, one needs to look at the first and foremost thing one needs to look at is a web application firewall. And the easiest way to do a web application firewall in the most cost-effective manner is to look at either a multi-tenant SaaS platform of the likes that we provide, or a cloud-based solution of the likes that we have a partnership with Akamai with, right? Once that is in place, you can immediately start looking at traffic that is hitting your web application, and trying to screen out the malicious actors from that. This, of course, by no means means that your web application itself becomes secure, but to the question of what is the quick and easy way of getting it done for a startup, this is something that I would believe in. As the startup grows, obviously they need to look at more mature software development practices, and the whole shift left towards security. So that security is aspect of the code review, is an aspect of QA and testing, and the code that gets released is also secure in nature.
Yeah, so I think those were the questions. I think we still have about 2-3 minutes. So I don't know if there is any more question, or we can take one, or then I will request Chetana to close the session. So I think only Raghav Krishnapal asked, which I will leave to NASSCOM, if the deck can be shared. So I think we'll come back on that after. we can share it. We'll mail it to everybody. I think there are some more questions. So the next question: can you tell us something about open source VPN?
Okay, well, open source VPN is one option available, but so it really depends on whether you want to use it from an enterprise perspective. So this is not to say that whether VPN is good or bad. Obviously, VPN provides a secure tunnel over a public network, so your data is secure. So that's not the point. VPN is insecure in the current context, right? It's not insecure in and of itself. Whether it is OpenVPN or whether it is a paid version of any VPN solution, when you give VPN access to anybody, that person virtually becomes part of that network. Okay, so any threat or a threat actor residing on the machine of that particular user who gets access to the network through VPN can start moving laterally across the network. Okay, and hence we need to move away from that approach to a zero trust approach. And what does a zero trust approach mean? That we are saying, I don't trust you just because you have a username and password of VPN. I'm not going to give you full access to the network. I am going to give you access only to those applications through a enterprise access type of solution, only to those applications to which you need access to. If you're from the marketing team, for example, you don't need access to the finance application. So why should I give you access to the entire network, right? And the way zero trust is implemented is diametrically opposite to the way VPN is implemented, because in the VPN you need to open a port coming into the firewall, that is from outside to the inside. Okay, so you're basically opening a hole in the firewall. With a zero trust approach, it's the reverse. You are closing that hole and you are opening a connection from the inside to the outside, so from a trusted to the untrusted network, and hence that is inherently much more secure to the compared to the VPN solutions.
Yeah, so there are two more questions. One is, what are the best approach for security audit? And second question is
Okay.
there any open source solution available for multi-factor authentication?
Okay, so the first question I think is a bit generic in nature, so I may need to understand from that particular person, from the participant, the context of asking that, and maybe now may not be a good time and we can connect later on for it. But suffice to say that a regular configuration audit and review using a mix of manual and automated tools is required.
Rishi, I think basically he's asked, is there a SaaS model? He's clarified that question further, saying that, is there a SaaS-based approach available for security audit?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, let me give you an example of what we do for firewall configuration audits. We have a SaaS-based solution. We have invested in a platform using a third-party tool, and through that we provide analysis of the firewall rules of any type of firewall. This can be done on a daily basis, this can be done on a monthly basis, or just once in a year, depending on the customer requirement. And it gives you detailed reports in terms of what policies are compliant to a certain standard, or what policies are weak, which policies are redundant, and so on and so forth. I'm just taking example of a firewall in this case. But yes, a configuration audit can definitely be provided. We are also doing this now for the multi-cloud configuration audits. So here too, we have invested in a tool, and we run that tool to look at all the cloud configurations across multi-cloud environments, whether they are done in a secure manner. Are there any redundancies in terms of configurations? Are there any holes that would typically come in and become a point of failure? So all of those things are delivered as SaaS only. Customers don't necessarily need to purchase anything on their own in this day and age.
So I think we'll take this one last question, because I think we're almost out of time. Is there any open source solution for multi-factor authentication?
I may not be completely able to answer that question. I'm sure there are open source solutions. I know of a few, but bringing that name out, any name out in a public forum is probably something that I want to desist from. So if it's okay, we should probably take that offline.
Okay. So good. I think with that, I think we're almost out of time. So I would just like to thank everybody, all the people who have joined. I hope it was useful and it will help you, bring some of the changes, and put it to use in your own environment. So thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you, Nitin,
thank you.
Ashwin, and Krishna for taking us through the entire presentation. I would request you to share the shareable version as the audience are demanding for it. And we will share the recording also the audience, maybe in a day or two. Thank you so much. Do write into us if you want us to take any further topics. Thank you.
Thank you.